The call came while I was in Tokyo, closing a deal for my investment firm's latest acquisition. Isabella, I hope you don't mind, but I cleaned out your old room while you were traveling, Mom said, her voice carrying that tone of maternal satisfaction that usually preceded news I wouldn't like. I was in my hotel suite overlooking the city, reviewing contracts for the purchase of a small but promising tech startup. At 31, I'd built Meridian Capital into one of the most successful investment firms on the West Coast, with assets under management approaching $2 billion. What kind of cleaning, Mom? Well, you know those paintings you had hanging on the walls? The abstract ones that never made any sense to anyone. My blood went cold. What about them? I threw them away, sweetheart. They were just taking up space, and frankly they were quite ugly. I don't know where you got them, but they looked like something a child could have painted. I set down my contract and walked to the window, trying to process what she'd just told me. Mom, which paintings exactly did you throw away? All of them. There were 3 of those horrible abstract things. Lots of splatters and random colors. I boxed them up and put them out with the trash Tuesday morning. Tuesday morning. Today is Friday. Yes, and I wanted to call you right away, but I thought you might be upset. But honey, now your old room looks so much better. I put up some nice landscape prints I found at HomeGoods. Much more pleasant to look at. I closed my eyes and tried to stay calm. Mom, can you describe the paintings you threw away? Oh, I don't know how to describe them. Just messy-looking things. One had a lot of blue and white splatters, another was mostly yellow and red swirls, and the third looked like someone had thrown paint at a canvas randomly. She had just described 3 original Jackson Pollock paintings that I'd acquired through private sales over the past 2 years. Each piece was worth approximately $89 million, making my collection valued at $267 million total. They had been hanging in my childhood bedroom not because I was storing them there, but because I'd wanted to enjoy them in the space where I'd first fallen in love with art as a child. Mom, those weren't decorations. They were investments. Investments? Sweetheart, I know you're smart about money, but those things were not investments. They were eyesores. They were original Jackson Pollock paintings. Silence. Jackson who? Jackson Pollock. One of the most important American artists of the 20th century. His paintings regularly sell for tens of millions of dollars at auction. Isabella, that's impossible. Those paintings were just random splashes of paint. Mom, I need you to think very carefully. Are you absolutely certain you put them in the trash? Yes, I'm certain. The garbage truck came that afternoon. They're long gone. I sat down heavily in my hotel chair. Do you remember which trash company services your neighborhood? What does that matter? Because I need to find out if there's any possibility of recovering them from the landfill. Isabella, you're scaring me. Are you saying those ugly paintings were actually valuable? Each painting was worth approximately $89 million. You threw away $267 million in artwork. The line went silent except for the sound of my mother's sharp intake of breath. That's not possible, she whispered. It's not only possible, it's documented. The paintings were professionally appraised and insured through Lloyd's of London. Insured? For how much? $267 million total. Oh my God. Isabella, what have I done? You threw away some of the most valuable artwork in private hands because you thought it was ugly. I could hear her starting to hyperventilate. What are we going to do? Can we get them back? Can we call the dump? I'm going to call my insurance company and initiate a claim for total loss due to accidental destruction. Then I'm going to call the waste management company to see if there's any remote possibility of recovery, though after 3 days in a landfill, the paintings are almost certainly destroyed. Insurance claim? Isabella, won't that cause problems? It will cause an investigation. Insurance companies don't pay out $267 million without thoroughly examining every aspect of the loss. What kind of investigation? I thought about how to explain this gently. They're going to want to verify that the paintings were actually destroyed and not stolen or sold illegally. They'll interview you extensively about exactly what happened and when. But I just threw them away. I didn't know. I know that, and you'll need to explain that to them. But Mom, $267 million is enough money that they're going to scrutinize every detail. After hanging up, I immediately called my insurance broker in London. Miss Cavendish, I need to report a total loss of the Pollock collection. The entire collection? What happened? They were accidentally thrown away by a family member who didn't recognize their value. The silence on the other end lasted nearly 10 seconds. Miss Cavendish, did you say thrown away? Put out with household trash and collected by waste management. The paintings are presumed destroyed in a landfill. I've never processed a claim quite like this before. We'll need to send an adjuster immediately to document the scene and interview all parties involved. I'm currently in Tokyo but flying back tonight. The family member responsible is available for immediate interview. We'll have someone there tomorrow morning. And Miss Cavendish, I should mention that a claim of this magnitude will require extensive investigation and documentation. I understand. I have all the authentication documents, purchase records and appraisal reports. Good. You'll need all of that and more. I spent the rest of my time in Tokyo arranging an early flight home and trying to calculate the implications of losing $267 million in artwork. While I could absorb the financial loss, my investment firm was highly profitable, and I had a diversified portfolio worth over $400 million. The cultural loss was irreplaceable. Those Pollock paintings represented a significant piece of American art history, and now they were decomposing in a California landfill. The flight home gave me 12 hours to think about how this had happened. My parents had never understood my interest in modern art, viewing my collection as an expensive and incomprehensible hobby. When I'd started acquiring significant pieces, I'd tried to explain their cultural and financial importance, but those conversations had always been met with polite disinterest. Abstract art is nice for some people, I suppose, Mom had said when I'd shown her photos of my first major acquisition, but I prefer pictures that look like something real. Eventually, I'd stopped trying to share my passion for art with my family. They knew I collected paintings, but they assumed it was a minor hobby rather than a serious investment in cultural artifacts. Saturday morning, I was back at my parents' house in Marin County when the insurance adjuster arrived. James Morrison was a serious man in his 50s who specialized in high-value art claims. Miss Cavendish, I need to see exactly where the paintings were displayed and understand precisely how they were disposed of. I led him to my old bedroom, where Mom's new HomeGoods landscape prints hung in place of the Pollocks. The 3 paintings were hanging here, here and here, I said, pointing to the walls. Each was professionally framed and had been hanging in this room for approximately 18 months. James was taking detailed photographs and measurements. And your mother removed them when? Tuesday morning. She put them in cardboard boxes and placed them at the curb for regular household waste collection. Mrs. Rodriguez, he said to my mother, who had been hovering anxiously in the doorway, I need to ask you some specific questions about what happened. My mother sat down on my old bed, looking pale and shaken. I'll tell you anything you need to know. Can you describe your daughter's art collection as you understood it? I thought they were just decorations. Paintings she'd bought because she liked them. I had no idea they were valuable. Had she ever discussed their value with you? Mom looked at me apologetically. Isabella talks about art sometimes, but I don't really understand that world. She mentions buying paintings, but I assumed they were like any other artwork. A few $100, maybe $1,000 at most. Were you aware that she had insurance on the collection? No, I had no idea. James turned to me. Miss Cavendish, had you ever specifically told your family about the value of these pieces? I thought about this question carefully. I had mentioned that I was building a serious art collection and that the pieces were significant investments. But I had never quoted specific dollar amounts to my family. Why not? Because my family has never shown interest in the details of my art collecting. When I've tried to share information about acquisitions or valuations, the conversation typically shifts to other topics. James was making notes. Mrs. Rodriguez, when you decided to dispose of the paintings, did you consider asking your daughter first? I thought I was doing her a favor. The room looked so cluttered with those ugly paintings. I wanted to make it nicer for when she visits. Did you recognize the artist's name or signature on any of the pieces? I never looked at them that closely. They were just splatters and swirls. I couldn't imagine anyone paying good money for something like that. James spent 2 more hours documenting everything, photographing the room from every angle, and taking a detailed statement from my mother about the timeline of events. After he left, my mother and I sat in the living room in uncomfortable silence. Isabella, I feel sick about this. How could I have known those horrible paintings were worth so much money? They weren't horrible, Mom. They were important pieces of American art history created by one of the most influential painters of the 20th century. But they looked so random. like accidents. Jackson Pollock's technique was revolutionary. He developed a method of painting that expressed pure energy and emotion through controlled chaos. His work is in major museums around the world. I just don't understand how splashing paint on canvas is worth $89 million. I looked at my mother, a woman who had raised me to value education, hard work, and financial responsibility, but who had never developed an appreciation for the cultural significance of art. Mom, do you understand what I do for a living? You have an investment company. You help rich people manage their money. I identify undervalued assets and help clients build portfolios that preserve and grow wealth across generations. Art is one of those asset classes. So you bought those paintings to make money? I bought them because they represented significant cultural value that I believed would appreciate over time. But more than that, I bought them because they moved me emotionally. I genuinely loved those pieces. Mom started crying. I threw away $267 million because I thought I was cleaning up clutter. You threw away $267 million because you made assumptions about something you didn't understand, and you acted on those assumptions without asking questions. How can you ever forgive me? I thought about her question. The financial loss was devastating but manageable. The cultural loss was irreplaceable. But the underlying issue was more complex than just the destroyed artwork. Mom, this isn't really about forgiveness. It's about understanding. For years, I've tried to share my interests and achievements with this family, and for years, those conversations have been dismissed or ignored. We don't dismiss your interests. When I showed you photos of my first major art acquisition, you said modern art wasn't your thing and changed the subject. When I tried to explain why I was passionate about collecting, you suggested I buy something prettier instead. When I mentioned that my collection was becoming significant, you said it was nice that I had a hobby. But we didn't know it was so important to you. Everything I'm passionate about is important to me, Mom. My career, my investments, my art collection, my philanthropic work, they're all expressions of who I am and what I care about. But this family has consistently treated my interests as less worthy of attention than other people's hobbies. That's not true. Last month at Sunday dinner, you spent 30 minutes discussing Jennifer's scrapbooking hobby and asking detailed questions about her techniques and supplies. When I mentioned acquiring a new piece for my collection, you said, "That's nice," and immediately asked Dad about his golf game. Mom was quiet, apparently thinking about the pattern I'd described. Maybe we haven't been good listeners. You haven't been curious listeners. There's a difference between being polite and being engaged. 3 days later, James Morrison called with his preliminary findings. Ms. Cavendish, we've confirmed with the waste management company that the materials from your parents' address were disposed of at the Redwood landfill. Given the volume of waste processed and the time elapsed, recovery is impossible. So the paintings are confirmed destroyed? Yes. However, we did find something interesting in our investigation. What's that? The waste management supervisor remembered the collection specifically. He said it was unusual to see framed artwork in household trash, so he took photos before the truck was emptied. My heart jumped. Photos of the paintings. Photos that clearly show 3 framed abstract paintings being loaded into the waste truck. The images aren't high resolution, but they're sufficient to document that the artwork was indeed disposed of as household waste. That's actually good news for the insurance claim. Very good news. It removes any question about the circumstances of the loss. We'll be processing the full claim amount. How long will that take? Given the documentation you've provided and the waste management company's cooperation, we should have this resolved within 60 days. After hanging up, I sat in my Meridian Capital office looking out at San Francisco Bay. The insurance payout would make me financially whole, but it wouldn't restore 3 irreplaceable pieces of art history. More importantly, it wouldn't address the underlying family dynamic that had led to this situation. My phone rang. It was my mother. Isabella, I've been doing research about Jackson Pollock. Oh. I spent the last 3 days reading about his life, his technique, his influence on art. I watched documentaries, visited museum websites, read critical analyses of his work. What did you think? I think I was completely wrong about his paintings. Not just about their value but about their meaning and importance. I'm beginning to understand why people find them powerful. I was surprised by her response. That must have been a lot of research. I needed to understand what I destroyed. Not just the money but the cultural significance. Isabella, I threw away pieces of history. Yes, you did. More than that, I threw away something you loved. Something you'd worked hard to acquire and cared deeply about. Even if they had been worth nothing, I had no right to make that decision for you. I felt something shift in our conversation. Thank you for saying that. I want to make this right somehow. I know I can't replace the paintings, but I want to understand your world better. Will you teach me about art? Mom, that's not necessary. Yes, it is. I've spent years dismissing something that's important to you because I didn't understand it. I want to learn. Not because of the money but because it matters to you. 6 months later, I was standing with my mother in the Museum of Modern Art in San Francisco, looking at a Jackson Pollock painting similar to one of the pieces she'd destroyed. I can see it now, she said quietly. The energy, the movement. It's like frozen motion. That's exactly what Pollock was trying to capture. Isabella, I need to ask you something. When you were growing up, did I always dismiss your interests this way? I thought about her question. Not always. But you tended to show more enthusiasm for activities that matched your own interests and understanding. That was unfair to you. It was limiting for both of us. You missed out on learning about things I was passionate about, and I learned to stop sharing those passions with family. Mom nodded, studying the painting in front of us. I've been thinking about that a lot. About all the conversations we should have had, all the questions I should have asked. It's not too late to start having those conversations. Will you show me your new collection when you start acquiring pieces again? I smiled. The insurance settlement had been finalized, and I was already working with dealers to identify potential acquisitions. I'd like that. But Mom, I need you to be genuinely interested, not just polite. I promise. And Isabella? I'm proud of what you've built, your business, your success, your knowledge about art. I should have been saying that all along. As we walked through the museum together, I felt something I hadn't experienced with my family in years. Genuine connection based on shared learning rather than polite tolerance of our differences. My phone buzzed with a text from my art dealer. Found something special. Early Rothko, privately held, impeccable provenance. Interested. I looked at the message, then at my mother, who was studying a Kandinsky with genuine curiosity and asking thoughtful questions about color theory. I typed back, very interested. Let's discuss tomorrow. For the first time since the Pollock incident, I was excited about adding to my collection. But more importantly, I was excited about having someone in my family who would appreciate not just the investment value, but the cultural significance of what I was building. Sometimes the most valuable things we lose aren't measured in dollars, but in understanding. And sometimes, losing something precious can teach us to value what we still have the chance to build together. 3 months later, I was hanging my first new acquisition, a stunning Rothko color field painting in my downtown penthouse. My mother was there for the installation, asking questions about the artist's technique and the piece's place in art history. It's beautiful, she said, studying the deep reds and oranges. I can feel the emotion in it. That's exactly what Rothko wanted viewers to experience. Isabella, can I tell you something? Of course. Losing those Pollock paintings was the worst mistake I've ever made. But it taught me something important about listening to you, about respecting what you care about, and about not making assumptions about things I don't understand. I know, Mom. I never want to be that dismissive again. About your art, your work, or anything else that matters to you. As we stood together looking at the new painting, I realized that while the Pollock collection could never be replaced, something equally valuable had emerged from its loss. A family relationship built on genuine understanding rather than polite indifference. And that, I thought, was worth more than any amount of insurance money.